Human, why do you have a mini Shai-Hulud between your legs? She shouted HFY Sci-Fi story. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Gavin wasn't exactly prepared for this. He thought his days of being caught off guard by strange alien species were long behind him. But here he was, staring at a 7-foot-tall alien warrior with violet skin, glowing yellow eyes, and what appeared to be an exaggeratedly large and suspiciously tentacle-like object dangling between her legs. She tilted her head, observing him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Human, she spoke, her voice deep and commanding. Why do you have a mini Shai-Hulud between your legs? Gavin's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. His hands instinctively moved to cover himself, and his face flushed a deep shade of red. He could barely comprehend what she was asking, let alone the strange comparison she'd just made to the giant sandworm from the deserts of Arrakis. It felt like a bad joke, but the intense way she was staring at him made it clear that it wasn't. Excuse me, Gavin stammered, unsure how to respond to this alien warrior. Is this a test of some kind? What are you talking about? The alien warrior grinned, her sharp teeth glinting under the harsh light of the alien world they were stranded on. I've heard stories of your species, but I never thought I'd see one in person, she said, her tone dripping with both amusement and intrigue. Humans are so strange. Gavin was caught off guard. He had been stranded on this godforsaken planet after a malfunction with his shuttle, and the last thing he expected was a bizarre confrontation with an alien species who seemed more interested in his anatomy than offering assistance. Look, I don't know what you're talking about, Gavin said, still trying to make sense of the situation. I'm just a pilot, stuck here. I need to get back to my ship. The alien warrior stepped closer, her towering figure casting a long shadow over him. Her scent, a mix of burning sand and something sweet yet pungent, filled his senses as she leaned in, inspecting him with fascination. You're quite fascinating for such a primitive species, she muttered, as if to herself, but loud enough for Gavin to hear. I didn't expect a human to be so complicated. Gavin's heart was racing. He wasn't sure what she meant by complicated, but it didn't sound like a compliment. She had a strange aura about her, one that made it hard to think clearly. He felt both intrigued and slightly terrified. I'm just trying to survive out here. I don't know what your deal is, but I need shelter and supplies. The alien warrior's yellow eyes flicked down to his waist, where she clearly noticed the uncomfortable way he was trying to shield himself. She raised an eyebrow. Do you not know what I'm referring to? She asked, her voice dripping with amusement now. This strange appendage. Do you have no control over it? Gavin didn't know what to say. He was trying to keep things together, but it was becoming increasingly clear that the alien warrior wasn't just curious. She was intrigued. He swallowed hard, his thoughts still scattered as he tried to find his bearings. No, he said, his voice unsteady. I have control over it. She smirked, clearly unconvinced by his response. It's not control that I'm questioning, she said, stepping even closer now. It's the reason why it exists at all. Gavin could feel the heat rising in his cheeks, but he wasn't sure if it was from embarrassment or the strange chemistry building between them. The warrior's gaze remained locked on him, intense and unyielding, and something told him this encounter wasn't going to be a simple exchange of information. No, this felt like the beginning of something far more complicated. As she loomed above him, her presence overwhelming, Gavin couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to take a turn he hadn't seen coming. But before he could process it further, she spoke again, her tone shifting from playful curiosity to something much more serious. You humans, you always think you have control over everything. But your biology, it's not as simple as you think. Gavin's stomach churned. What the hell was she talking about? Could this be some kind of psychological game, or was she just messing with him? One thing was clear. This wasn't going to be your average rescue mission. This was something much more personal. And as the warrior stepped back, her eyes never leaving his, Gavin had the feeling that his mini Shai-Hulud wasn't the only thing he was going to have to explain in the coming hours. The tension between Gavin and the towering alien warrior, Thara, thickened as the seconds dragged on. Her yellow eyes remained locked onto him, unwavering and intense. The confusion in Gavin's mind was beginning to give way to something more primal, a mix of curiosity and the undeniable pull of her presence. Despite his best efforts to remain focused on his mission to repair his ship and escape this desolate planet, every part of his body seemed to respond to her with a heightened awareness he could not ignore. "You seem uneasy, human," Thara observed, her voice deep, almost mocking, as she leaned in just a little closer. Gavin swallowed, trying to maintain control over his racing heart. "I'm just trying to understand what's going on," he replied, his voice tight. "You're asking about my body like it's some kind of test." Thara smirked, clearly enjoying the reaction she was getting. "Is it a test?" she mused. "Or are you the one testing yourself?" Her words hung in the air, thick with implication. Gavin shifted uncomfortably but couldn't look away. There was something about the way she was looking at him, studying him, that felt almost predatory. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the strange feelings bubbling up inside him. "I don't know what you expect from me," Gavin said, his tone a little more defensive than he intended. "I'm just here to fix my ship and get off this godforsaken planet." Thara tilted her head, her long hair cascading over her shoulder as she took a step closer. The movement was fluid, almost hypnotic. "You humans are fascinating," she murmured. "You act as if you're in control, but I can see it in your eyes. You're trying to hold back, trying to resist something you don't fully understand." Gavin's breath hitched in his throat. He didn't know if it was the way she spoke, or the way she seemed to see through him, but something inside him shifted. He felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't experienced before. He wanted to push her away, to demand answers about what was happening, but at the same time, he couldn't help the strange attraction that was building between them. "I'm not trying to resist anything," Gavin said, his voice softer now, almost unsure. "But you're making this hard to ignore." Thara chuckled, a low, throaty sound that sent a shiver down his spine. "Is that so?" she asked, her smile widening slightly. "Maybe you're starting to understand, human." For a moment, they stood there in silence, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. Gavin tried to steady his breathing, but it was becoming increasingly difficult as he felt Thara's presence loom over him. "I've met many species, human," Thara said after a long pause, her voice softening, "but none quite like yours. You're so unpredictable, so full of contradictions." Gavin opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, she placed a finger gently against his lips, silencing him. "It's not just your body I'm curious about," she whispered, her voice dropping to a near purr. "It's your mind, your instincts, the way you react to things that are foreign to you." Gavin's eyes widened slightly as the realization hit him. She wasn't just interested in his physical form. She was studying him in a way that felt like an experiment, a way to understand the human psyche. He could feel his pulse quicken as she stepped back, looking at him with a mixture of fascination and something darker. "I can see it now," she continued. "You're not just a pilot stranded on a planet. You're something more, something I can't quite explain." Gavin opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, Thara's expression shifted. Her smile faded, replaced by something far more serious. "You think you're in control," she said, her tone suddenly cold. "But there's something about you, something about your species, that makes you dangerous." The words hung in the air like a threat, but Gavin couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. What was she trying to tell him? What did she mean by dangerous? As if reading his thoughts, Thara's eyes darkened. "You're not just another lost human. You're something different." Gavin felt a chill run down his spine, but before he could ask more questions, Thara turned away, her long, muscular frame vanishing into the shadows of the rocky cave. "Get some rest, human," she said over her shoulder, her voice now distant. "Tomorrow, we'll see just how much control you truly have." Gavin stood frozen for a moment, his mind reeling. What did she mean? Was she warning him, or was this part of some larger game she was playing? Whatever it was, he knew one thing for certain. This was far from over. And whether he liked it or not, Thara wasn't going anywhere. He couldn't help but wonder, as he made his way back to his makeshift camp, what would happen next. The mystery of her words lingered in his mind, and the strange, inexplicable connection between them seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. What was she truly after? And how far would this bizarre encounter take them both? The next morning, Gavin awoke to the harsh light of the alien sun streaming through the narrow opening of the cave. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, his mind still spinning from the encounter with Thara the night before. He had no idea what she meant by her cryptic words, but one thing was clear. He had to get off this planet, and fast. His ship was still in need of repairs, and with each passing hour, the situation was becoming more dire. But as he gathered his gear and prepared to head out, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play here, something deeper than just survival. Thara's words echoed in his mind, and the curiosity he had been trying to suppress was bubbling to the surface. He found himself wondering what it was about his species that had intrigued her so much, what made him, and humans in general, so different in her eyes. The thought was interrupted by a low growl from the entrance of the cave. Gavin froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the pulse rifle strapped to his side. He had learned the hard way that being too complacent on this planet could get him killed. He cautiously stepped toward the opening, peering out into the barren landscape. To his surprise, it was Thara who stood there, her massive form silhouetted against the harsh light of the alien sun. She turned to face him, her golden eyes meeting his with a strange intensity. "You're awake," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "I thought you might still be hiding in your little cave, too scared to face the reality of what's coming." Gavin raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, what's coming?" Thara stepped forward, her footsteps deliberate and heavy, sending small clouds of dust into the air with each step. "You don't think you're the only one stranded here, do you?" she asked, her tone laced with amusement. "There are others, humans, just like you. And they're not here to be your friends." Gavin's stomach sank as the implications of her words hit him. "You're saying there are more humans here? And they're hostile?" Thara nodded, her expression unreadable. "Not just humans," she replied, "but others. Many others. You've got a bigger problem than just your ship, human. There's a war brewing, and you're caught in the middle of it." The weight of her words hit Gavin like a ton of bricks. A war? Here? With everything else he had to deal with, this was the last thing he had expected. He had come to this planet for a simple repair mission, and now he was trapped in the midst of some intergalactic conflict. "I didn't sign up for any of this," Gavin muttered, frustration and fear rising in his chest. Thara's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a faint, almost predatory smile. "No one ever does, human," she said. "But that's how it works. You don't get to choose who you fight. You fight because you have no other choice." Gavin took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. This was bad, really bad. But as much as he hated to admit it, he knew Thara was right. He was stuck here, with no way off the planet, and no idea what was really going on. "So what now?" Gavin asked, looking up at her, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Thara seemed to consider the question for a moment before speaking again. "We fight," she said simply. "And if you're smart, you'll fight alongside me." Gavin hesitated, staring at her. He didn't know whether to trust her or not. She was an alien, a warrior from another species, and yet, there was something about her that made him want to believe her. Maybe it was the way she had seen through him the night before, or maybe it was the strange sense of camaraderie that had begun to form between them despite their differences. "Fine," Gavin said after a long pause, his decision made. "I'll fight. But what do you expect from me? I'm just one man, and I'm not exactly equipped for a war." Thara's smile grew wider, as if she had been expecting this answer all along. "You're more equipped than you think," she replied. "You humans are nothing if not resourceful. And if you can survive this planet, you can survive anything." Gavin wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a threat, but at that moment, it didn't matter. He was in this, whether he liked it or not. "All right, I'm in," he said, his voice firm. "Now, tell me what the hell's really going on here." Thara turned away, gesturing for him to follow her. "It's a long story," she said, her tone serious. "But I'll tell you everything you need to know. And when this is over, maybe you'll understand why you had to be here." Gavin followed her out into the barren wasteland, his mind still racing. A war, hostile humans, and an alien who seemed to be the only one willing to offer him answers. It wasn't the kind of mission he had signed up for, but it was the one he was stuck with. And no matter how he felt about it, one thing was certain. This was just the beginning. The harsh winds of the alien planet bit into Gavin's skin as he followed Thara across the desolate landscape. Every step they took felt like it was leading them into the heart of something far bigger than either of them had anticipated. Thara, her imposing figure cutting through the wind with ease, seemed to move with a purpose, as if she knew exactly where they were headed. Gavin, on the other hand, was trying to absorb everything she had just told him about the war and the factions at play. What he didn't understand was how his ship, a simple repair mission, had gotten tangled up in this conflict, and why the alien warrior, Thara, was so intent on making him a part of it. "So what's the real deal here?" Gavin asked, trying to keep pace with her long strides, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. "You said I'm not the only human on this planet, but what does that mean for me? What kind of war are we talking about?" Thara didn't answer right away, her gaze fixed on the horizon. When she did speak, her voice was low, measured. "The war is bigger than any of us, Gavin," she said. "It's a war over resources, over power. This planet is rich with minerals that many species in the galaxy want, but there's only so much to go around. That's why you're here, why they brought you here. You're a part of something much bigger than you realize." Gavin clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of her words. The more he heard, the less it made sense. He was just a pilot. How could he possibly be a part of some galactic war over resources? "I don't even know who they are," he muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. "Who brought me here? Why am I stuck in the middle of this?" Thara stopped abruptly, turning to face him, her yellow eyes narrowing with intensity. "You still don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice edged with a hint of exasperation. "You're not just stuck here. You're here for a reason. You were chosen, Gavin. Your species, humans, have something that others need, something that can shift the balance of this war. And that's why they're watching you." Gavin felt a chill run down his spine at her words. "Who's watching me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Thara's expression hardened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something dangerous in her eyes. "I can't say much more than that," she replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "But I'll tell you this, you need to stay sharp. Trust no one, not even those who seem like allies. The stakes are too high, and the people who want you are not interested in your well-being." The weight of her warning hung in the air between them, making the already harsh environment feel even colder. Gavin's mind raced. He had no idea what was really happening or what was expected of him, but he knew one thing for sure. Thara wasn't lying. He could see it in her eyes. This wasn't some random survival situation anymore. This was something much more complex and far more dangerous. The sound of a distant rumble interrupted his thoughts, and he turned to see a dark shape rising from the horizon. It was massive, too massive to be just a natural formation, and as it drew closer, he could make out the distinct shape of a ship, a warship, descending from the sky. "What is that?" Gavin asked, his voice tight with unease. Thara's lips curled into a smirk, but there was no humor in it. "It's here," she said simply, her tone deadly serious. "We don't have much time. Get ready." Gavin didn't have to ask what she meant. He could see it now, the shape of the ship getting larger as it descended closer to the ground. It was unmistakable, a warship of a faction he had only heard of in hushed whispers. This was no accident. They were here for him. For them. "Are we fighting?" Gavin asked, adrenaline spiking in his veins. Thara nodded once, her face unreadable. "We're fighting. But you need to stay close, and don't do anything stupid. You're not ready for this, not yet." Gavin wanted to argue, to tell her that he didn't need her guidance, but something about her tone made him hesitate. Maybe it was the fact that she had already seen too much of him, or maybe it was the fact that he knew, deep down, that he wasn't ready. "Not yet. Stay close," Thara repeated, her voice soft but firm. "And whatever you do, don't make yourself a target." The warship's descent slowed as it reached the ground, and Gavin's breath caught in his throat. He could hear the engines whine and shift as they powered down. This was it, the moment everything changed. Gavin had come to this planet to fix his ship and leave. Now he was caught in the middle of a war, with no clear way out. And with each passing moment, he could feel the stakes getting higher. The world around him seemed to close in as Thara led the way, her movements sharp and precise, every step a reminder that she was ready for what was coming. Gavin followed, trying to keep up, the uncertainty gnawing at him. He had no choice but to trust her now, But a voice in the back of his mind told him that even trust might not be enough to survive what lay ahead. The warship loomed overhead as Thara led Gavin through the rugged terrain, her eyes never leaving the descending craft. Gavin could feel his pulse pounding in his chest, each thudding heartbeat reminding him that this was no longer a simple repair mission. He was deep in the heart of a conflict that spanned galaxies, and it was becoming painfully clear that survival was his only objective now. The ship finally touched down with a deafening roar, its massive engines kicking up dust and debris, making the ground tremble beneath their feet. Gavin instinctively crouched down, his hand once again gripping the pulse rifle at his side, ready for whatever was to come. "Stay close," Thara commanded in a low, urgent tone, "and keep your head down. This isn't a fight you're ready for, but you don't have a choice." Gavin nodded, keeping his gaze fixed on the warship as the hatch slowly opened, revealing a group of heavily armed soldiers. They were tall, humanoid figures, their armor gleaming under the harsh sun, and their eyes glowed a faint red, a sign of their advanced technology. They moved in perfect synchrony, each one clearly a trained warrior. As they stepped out, Gavin felt a cold chill creep down his spine. These weren't just random soldiers, they were elite, and they were here for a reason. "What are they after?" Gavin asked, his voice tight with fear. "You," Thara replied bluntly. "They're after you. They know who you are, and they're not here for small talk." Gavin's heart skipped a beat. "But why me?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I'm nobody." Thara shot him a sharp glance, her yellow eyes narrowing. "You're more than you think," she said, her voice cold and unforgiving. "And that's what makes you dangerous. To them, to everyone." Gavin didn't have time to process her words because the first of the soldiers stepped forward, his weapon trained on them. "Step aside," the soldier barked in a deep, mechanical voice. "The human comes with us." Thara didn't move, standing tall and unyielding, her expression fierce. "Not happening," she growled, her voice low and full of authority. "This human is under my protection. You want him, you'll have to go through me." The soldier's eyes flickered with something like amusement, but his stance didn't waver. "You don't have the authority to make that decision," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "We're taking him, and you're in the way." Without warning, he raised his weapon, aiming directly at Thara. Gavin's breath caught in his throat, his muscles locking up as the cold, metallic barrel of the gun stared him down. Thara didn't flinch. In one fluid motion, she drew a blade from her side, its edge shimmering in the harsh sunlight, and she charged. The soldier didn't even have time to react before Thara was upon him, her blade slicing through the air with a speed that was almost too fast for Gavin to follow. The soldier raised his weapon in defense, but Thara was already too close. With a single, precise strike, she disarmed him, the weapon falling harmlessly to the ground. The soldier staggered back, clearly surprised by her speed and skill, but he didn't back down. "You're making a mistake," he growled, his voice now tinged with anger. Thara stepped forward, her face inches from his, her eyes burning with an intensity that made Gavin's breath catch. "No," she said, her voice calm but lethal. "You're the one making a mistake. You underestimate humans." The soldier hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his features, but before he could act, Thara's blade was back in motion, swift and precise. In a flash, she had him pinned to the ground, the tip of her blade pressing into his throat. Gavin watched in stunned silence, his mind racing. He had no idea what was happening or what Thara's true intentions were, but one thing was certain. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she was not going to let anyone take him without a fight. The remaining soldiers stood frozen for a moment, unsure of how to respond. The tension in the air was palpable, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the entire world had stopped. "Leave now," Thara said, her voice sharp and commanding, "or I'll make sure your trip here was a waste." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, clearly weighing their options. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they began to retreat, slowly backing away toward the warship. "This isn't over," the first soldier spat, his voice filled with venom. "We'll be back for you, human." "I'll be waiting," Thara replied, her tone icy. As the soldiers boarded their ship and it lifted off, disappearing into the sky, Gavin let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to Thara, his mind still reeling from the encounter. What the hell was that? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. Thara sheathed her blade, her posture still tense but relaxed. That, she said, was a reminder that no one controls you but yourself. You're not some pawn to be moved around, but you need to stay vigilant. They won't stop until they get what they want. Gavin nodded, his mind slowly starting to catch up with the chaos around him. And what do they want? Thara's eyes softened for a brief moment before her expression hardened again. They want you, Gavin, but they don't know what they're getting themselves into. Gavin wasn't sure whether to feel comforted or terrified by her words, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. The warship disappeared into the sky, leaving a trail of dust and tension behind it as Thara and Gavin stood in the barren landscape, the weight of their recent encounter hanging between them. Gavin's mind was still reeling from the close call. He had never imagined that his simple repair mission would drag him into a galactic war, with soldiers hunting him down. That was too close, Gavin muttered, his voice barely above a whisper as he wiped the sweat from his brow. Thara didn't respond right away. Instead, she kept her gaze fixed on the sky, her expression unreadable. After a few moments, she turned to him, her voice steady but carrying an edge. You think that was close? That was nothing. The next time they come, they won't be so easily deterred. Gavin swallowed hard, his throat dry. What do you mean? Thara's eyes flashed, her yellow irises glowing faintly in the dim light. I mean, this isn't over. Those soldiers were only the beginning. They'll keep coming, in greater numbers, and they'll be more prepared. You need to be ready. The words hit Gavin like a cold slap. He hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly. One moment, he was just a pilot stranded on a desolate planet, and now he was in the middle of a deadly conflict, being hunted by unknown forces. I didn't ask for this, Gavin said, his voice cracking with frustration. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to fix my ship and get out of here. Thara stepped closer, her presence towering over him. You think I asked for this? You think I wanted to be stuck? In this war, she snapped, her voice sharp. We don't always get to choose, Gavin. Sometimes, we're caught in the middle of things, and we have no choice but to fight. Gavin felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen a different side of Thara in the heat of battle, a side that was fierce, determined, and unrelenting. She wasn't just an alien warrior. She was a survivor, shaped by the horrors of the conflict she had been thrust into. So what now? Gavin asked, his voice quieter now, trying to regain his focus. We fight, Thara said simply. We stay alive. We prepare for the worst. And when the time comes, we fight back. Gavin nodded slowly, still processing everything. He had no choice but to trust her. She knew more about this war than he did, and if he was going to survive, he needed her by his side. The thought of fighting in a war he didn't understand was daunting, but it was better than waiting to be caught by those soldiers again. How do we prepare? Gavin asked, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. Thara looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing her words carefully. First, we need to get to the underground resistance. They're the ones who can help us fight back. They know the terrain, they know the enemy, and they have the resources we need to survive. Gavin raised an eyebrow, surprised. Underground resistance? I thought I was the only one on this planet. Thara shook her head, a grim smile tugging at the corner of her lips. You're not the only human here. There are more of you. And there's a network of rebels working to push back against the forces trying to take control of this planet. We just need to find them before the enemy does. The idea of an underground movement, people fighting back against a powerful enemy, seemed almost like something out of a science fiction novel. But the reality of the situation was starting to hit Gavin. The stakes were much higher than he had ever imagined. How do we find them? Gavin asked, his mind working through the logistics. We don't, Thara replied. Not directly. They have safe houses all over this planet, hidden from prying eyes. But there's a contact. Someone who can get us in touch with them. Who is it? Gavin asked, leaning forward slightly. A woman named Lyra, Thara said, her voice low and filled with respect. She's one of the leaders of the resistance. She's been fighting this war for years, and she knows how to stay hidden. If anyone can help us, it's her. Gavin nodded, determination beginning to replace the fear in his chest. All right, let's find her. Thara gave him a quick, approving glance before turning toward the horizon. We'll need to move quickly, she said. The longer we stay out here, the more likely it is that the enemy will find us. But we have a better chance of making it to the resistance if we stick together and keep our heads down. Gavin didn't need any more convincing. He had no idea what he was walking into, but at least he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone anymore. Thara had shown him what it meant to fight back, and for the first time since he crashed on this planet, Gavin felt like he had a purpose. With his pulse rifle slung over his shoulder and Thara by his side, they began their trek across the desert, the harsh wind biting at their faces as they moved forward, ready to face whatever came next. The world around them was vast and unforgiving, but for the first time, Gavin felt like he might have a fighting chance. The journey to find Lyra, the leader of the underground resistance, felt longer than Gavin had expected. Thara moved with purpose, her steps unyielding, her eyes scanning the barren landscape around them, constantly alert for any sign of movement. Gavin tried to keep up, but the desolate terrain made every step feel like an effort. The harsh winds bit at his skin, and the sun beat down mercilessly, but there was no time to rest. The urgency of their mission pushed him forward, every thought consumed by the looming danger that still hovered over them. As they neared the outskirts of a small, hidden settlement, Thara motioned for him to slow down, her body language tense. She was listening, her senses sharp. Gavin tried to steady his breathing, his nerves on edge. He had no idea what to expect once they reached Lyra. Would she be able to help them? Would she trust them? "We're close," Thara whispered. "Stay low and follow my lead. The resistance doesn't take kindly to strangers, and we can't afford to draw attention." Gavin nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been in a situation like this before, but he knew that Thara was right. They couldn't afford to make a mistake now. The last thing they needed was to run into the wrong people. As they approached the settlement, the buildings became less crude and more structured, hidden from view by the jagged rocks and steep hills that surrounded them. Thara motioned for Gavin to stop behind a large boulder, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the area. "There," she said softly, pointing toward a small, unassuming building at the edge of the settlement. "That's where we'll find Lyra." Gavin followed her gaze, his curiosity piqued. The building looked plain, almost like a barn or storage unit, but Thara's eyes told him that this was no ordinary structure. It was something more, a place of refuge, a safe house. They approached cautiously, moving through the shadows, and as they reached the door, Thara raised her hand, signaling for Gavin to wait. She knocked softly, a rhythmic pattern that seemed almost deliberate, and after a tense moment, the door creaked open, revealing a small, wiry woman with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. She didn't speak at first, but her gaze flickered over both of them, studying them intently. "You're late," Lyra finally said, her voice cool and measured, but there was no mistaking the underlying tension. "I thought you'd be here sooner. The enemy is closing in." Thara stepped forward, her posture unyielding. "We had to be careful," she replied, her tone matching Lyra's seriousness. "But we're here now, and we need your help." "The human is." Lyra's eyes locked onto Gavin's for the first time, and for a moment, the air seemed to freeze. There was no warmth in her gaze, only cold calculation. "I know who he is," Lyra interrupted, cutting Thara off. "And I know what he's capable of." She stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. "Come inside. We don't have much time." The small, dimly lit room they entered was filled with various equipment, maps, communication devices, and the hum of technology that Gavin couldn't begin to understand. Lyra closed the door behind them, locking it with a mechanical click. "This isn't just about survival anymore," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with a gravity that sent a chill down Gavin's spine. "It's about the future of this planet. And you, human, you're going to play a part in that." Gavin didn't know whether to feel honored or terrified by her words. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said, his voice uncertain. "I'm just trying to get back home." Lyra fixed him with a hard stare. "Home? You think this is just some accident? You're here for a reason. Your species has something we need, and if you want to make it out of here alive, you'll need to understand that." Gavin felt his stomach churn at the implication. "I didn't ask for this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra didn't seem moved by his response. "No one asks for war," she said, "but it comes whether we want it or not. And now, you're part of it." Thara stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "We need your resources, Lyra. We need to take down the enemy before they get to us. Lyra's eyes flickered to Thara, then back to Gavin. She looked like she was weighing something in her mind before nodding slowly. All right, she said. I'll help you. But you need to be ready. This won't be easy. Gavin felt a strange sense of relief wash over him, but it was short-lived. Lyra's words had made it clear that whatever came next, it was going to be far from simple. They were at war now, whether they liked it or not, and their fight was just beginning. What do we need to do? Gavin asked, his voice steady with newfound resolve. Lyra motioned toward the table, where several maps and plans were spread out. We're going to hit them where it hurts, she said. And you, human, are going to be at the center of it all. The maps on the table were a mess of lines and markers, each one representing a different sector of the planet, each one detailing areas of interest for the resistance, and, more importantly, the enemy. Gavin leaned in closer, trying to make sense of the intricate web of locations, safe houses, and enemy strongholds, but it was all a blur. Lyra stood over the table, her finger tracing a path on the map as she spoke, her tone firm and decisive. This is where the enemy is concentrated, she said, pointing to a large section marked in red. They've taken control of the southern region, where the majority of the planet's resources are. They're using it as a staging ground to launch further attacks. Gavin looked at the map, his stomach tightening. So, we're attacking them there, he asked, his voice hesitant. That's right, Lyra replied, her gaze steady. But not just any attack. We're going to hit them where it hurts. We've tracked their supply lines, and we've discovered a weakness in their infrastructure. If we can take out their main power source, we can cripple their entire operation. Gavin swallowed hard. This was real now. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting back. He looked at Thara, who stood nearby, her expression unreadable. She had been silent since they entered the safe house, but Gavin could tell she was just as focused as Lyra. He had no idea what he was doing, no training for this, but he couldn't back down now. He had come too far. What do you need me to do? Gavin asked, his voice stronger now, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Lyra glanced at him, her expression softening slightly, but there was no mistaking the urgency in her eyes. You're going to help us destroy their power source, she said. You're the key to our success. The enemy is expecting a standard assault, but what they don't know is that we have someone on the inside, someone who can get to their main facility unnoticed. That's where you come in. Gavin's heart skipped a beat. You want me to infiltrate their base? He asked, his voice thick with disbelief. I'm not even a soldier. I don't have the training for this. Lyra's eyes locked onto his. You've already proven that you're capable of more than you think. You've survived this long, and that's something not many others can say. Besides, you don't need to be a soldier. You just need to know how to get in and out without being caught. Gavin shook his head. But how do you know I can do this? How do you know I'm the right person for the job? Lyra didn't flinch. Because you're human, she said simply. You're different from them. You have instincts, a creativity they can't predict. You've already proven that by making it this far. Gavin wanted to argue, but there was something in her words that resonated deep within him. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a hero, but he had been surviving for far longer than he ever thought possible. And if Lyra thought he could do this, maybe, just maybe, he could. All right, he said, his voice steady now. I'll do it. But I need to know everything. I need to know the layout of their base, their security, their patrols, everything. Lyra nodded, clearly satisfied with his response. She moved over to another table, pulling out a set of blueprints. These are the schematics of their main facility, she said, laying them out in front of him. You'll be entering through the underground tunnels. We've already marked the weakest points in their security, and we've set up some distractions to draw attention away from your entry point. Once inside, you'll need to disable their power source. It's located here. She pointed to a section marked in red on the blueprints, in the central control room. From there, it's just a matter of getting out without being detected. Gavin studied the blueprints carefully, his mind working overtime. He didn't know how he was going to do this, but for the first time since he crashed on this planet, he felt like he might actually have a chance. And what about you? Gavin asked, looking up at Lyra. What's your role in all this? Lyra smiled grimly. I'll be coordinating the attack from here, she said. I'll make sure the resistance has everything in place to back you up, and I'll keep you updated as you move through the facility. You won't be alone, Gavin. We'll be with you every step of the way. The words were meant to reassure him, but they only made the task ahead feel more daunting. He wasn't just fighting for his survival anymore. He was fighting for the future of this planet, and maybe even for his people. All right, Gavin said again, his voice firm. Let's do it. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, a faint but approving smile tugging at the corner of her lips. We'll make sure you're ready, but you need to move fast. The enemy won't wait for us to make our move. Gavin took a deep breath, his mind already racing with plans and contingencies. He wasn't ready for this, not by any means, but there was no turning back now. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. With one last look at the map and the faces of the resistance members gathered around him, Gavin knew that his fate, and the fate of this world, rested on his shoulders. The night before the mission, Gavin lay on a cot in the dimly lit safe house, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced, replaying every conversation, every moment that had brought him to this point. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even a trained fighter. He was just a pilot, someone who'd been caught in the crossfire of a war he hadn't asked for. Yet here he was, on the eve of an operation that could change the fate of an entire planet. You ready? Thara's voice broke through his thoughts, and Gavin turned to find her standing at the door, her silhouette framed by the faint light from the hallway. She had her gear on, her weapon strapped to her side, her face as unreadable as ever. He sat up, pushing the weight of his doubt aside. As ready as I'll ever be, he said, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding in his chest. Thara stepped into the room and leaned against the wall, her yellow eyes studying him. You know what you're walking into, right? She asked, her voice softer than usual, a hint of something almost like concern in her tone. Gavin nodded. I have the plans, I know the layout. I've been briefed. It's not just about getting in, she said quietly, her gaze unwavering. It's about getting out. The second you're in there, things could go south real fast. I can't help you inside that base. You're on your own. Gavin didn't say anything at first. He had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made it more real. Thara was right. This wasn't some simple raid. This was an infiltration, and once he was inside the enemy's stronghold, there would be no turning back. I'll make it out, Gavin said, his voice firm. We have a plan. I'll stick to it. Thara gave him a small nod, her eyes narrowing slightly. You've got guts, human. I'll give you that. She paused for a moment, then added, just don't let your ego get in the way. If you fail, it's not just your life on the line, it's the whole planet's. Gavin stood up, his nerves settling into a steely resolve. I won't fail. Thara stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. You've got one shot at this, she said, her voice low and intense. Get in, get the job done, and get out. Don't hesitate, and don't second-guess yourself. If you do, it's over. Gavin met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. He wasn't a hero, he wasn't some great warrior, but in that moment, he knew what he had to do. I understand, he said. Thara turned toward the door, her steps light but purposeful. Good. You're going to need all your wits out there. The enemy won't make it easy. As she left, Gavin took a deep breath and looked over the map once more. The central control room, the power source, it all had to be disabled. The plans were clear, but the real test was going to be executing them. He checked his gear one last time, his pulse rifle secure at his side, his comm device ready. It wasn't going to be easy. Nothing ever was, not on this planet. But there was no turning back now. The mission was set. Gavin moved toward the door and into the night. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. Lyra and the rest of the resistance were counting on him, and he couldn't afford to let them down. He reached the rendezvous point, where Lyra and her team were waiting. They gave him a few last-minute instructions and reassurances, but there was no time for small talk. The clock was ticking. Thara, as always, was silent but present, her eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. She gave him a brief nod as he approached. It's time, she said, her voice tight. Gavin nodded, his mind clearing of all distractions. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about the mission, about everyone who was counting on him. Let's do it, he said. Lyra handed him a small, portable explosive device. This is your key, she said. Once you've disabled the power source, use this to make sure they don't get it back online. Gavin took the device, tucking it securely into his vest. Understood, he said. I'll get it done. With that, He moved toward the underground tunnel that would lead him into the heart of the enemy's facility. The path was narrow and dark, but Gavin moved with purpose, every step calculated, every sound carefully noted. The closer he got to the central control room, the more the tension built in his chest. He could feel the enemy all around him, their presence almost tangible. But there was no turning back now. He had a job to do. As he reached the access point, he paused, checking his surroundings once more. He had memorized the security layout, knew where the guards would be, and knew where to hide if needed. He set the explosives and began to disable the power source, his fingers moving quickly, almost instinctively. It wasn't until the countdown on the device started that he realized just how much was riding on this moment. He had to get out, fast. As the device neared zero, Gavin made a final check on the power systems. His pulse quickened. The mission was almost complete. He was ready. The explosion rang out in the distance, signaling the success of his task. Gavin turned and sprinted, the sound of the enemy closing in, his heart pounding in his chest. The hard part was over, but the escape was just beginning.